Things are trending right now. The high volatile Karnataka upcoming elections and the rising rentals in the state's capital, Bengaluru. Now, I will leave the politics to be addressed by my able colleagues in the political beat and focus instead on property matters, the rents. Have rents in Bangalore and some of the key cities of India really risen as much as what social media makes you believe? Where have they gone and by how much? And most importantly, what are the legal protections that you as a renter have in this country? Joining me for this very interesting discussion, Dhaval Monani, Associate Professor and Director of Affordable Housing, Anant National University, Amarendra Sahu, Co-founder CEO, Nestaway Technologies, and Avikshit Moral, Partner, INDUSLAW. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Amarendra, because Nestaway has most of the data when it comes to rentals, let me ask you this question. Has there really been such a jump in rentals that it's become the hottest conversation in India's housing market on social media?
Thanks for having me. I think jumping directly to the question, yes, I think this is a very hotly debated topic in Bangalore, and I'm sure it sort of finds its ways to the social media. So what has happened is that the gated societies, the ones that are, so to say, cream rental properties in the town, they have seen a significant jump in rentals. And, as we see, and when we talk to owners, it's pretty much not very much owner driven as much as the tenant driven, because of the COVID situation. What's happening is that people aren't sure when it is actually going to end. Now also you see reports of daily infections counts growing. So what was this gated society, what was just a housing place, is also now a COVID hideout for a lot of people, because people are assuming if lockdown happens or work from home happens, they would want to be in a space where they could walk out in the evening. So you see that getting that apprehension / anxiety in minds of people coming into 20-30% increase in rental prices in top societies in Bangalore. Having said that, the other ones, the regular ones, the ones close to the IT pocket see 10-15% jump. So a lot of uncertainty around COVID and is actually finding its way to increase rental property prices, but non-IT areas in Bangalore haven't seen like a noticeable jump.
Okay, all right. So let's tell our audience what has been the jump in India's top 10 rental micro market increases by percentage, and this is Analog data, very precise. Let's just take three of the top, which is Thani Sandra, Whitefield and Sarjapur Road. And as Amarendra mentioned, that these are the IT hubs in Bengaluru. Now, Thani Sandra and Whitefield have seen a 30% jump in rentals when compared to 2019. But between 2019 and 2020, actually rents went down. Landlords were also forced to cut down rents because a lot of people went back home. After that, of course, if you take it from the 2020 to now period, there's been a 40% jump. Chembur in Mumbai has also seen almost 30% increase in rentals, and surprisingly, the next two are in Pune, Hinjewadi and Wagholi, followed by Pallavaram in Chennai, and Noida Sector 150 in NCR, and Baner in Pune again, and Mulund in MMR. So these are the top 10 micro markets with the highest rental increase between 2020 and 2023 percentage-wise is what we've shown you. Again, I'm saying that you have to keep a note that some of them have actually declined as well. Mr. Monani, I will come to you. Is this trend, so much about COVID or about inflation? Ultimately, this is an asset class which is so closely related to inflation. And why are we so surprised with this?
Thanks, Manisha. Thanks for having me. Now, when you look at rentals, I think you need to understand two things. One is rentals and one is rental yields. So while rentals in India are rising, one of the key problems in India remains that the rental yields are some of the lowest in the world. Today, if you rent out an apartment, it's likely to give you 2 or 3% return which is even less than your cost of capital. You borrow at nearly 8%. So what happens in a time of high inflation and rising interest rates is that even the landowners are unable to meet their payments. Now, for that, for rental to become a viable class for somebody to buy and rent, he needs to cover some costs. So that, of course, is one reason. Second, definitely COVID, because you saw this whole, this 2-year period in India where construction and supply came to a grinding halt and your supply of rental units increased. Now, when that reverses, you are likely to have this temporary distortion in the market. And all the regions you mentioned, we also need to take a step back and look at them contextually. There is a reason for Bangalore to rise because, Bangalore has had a lot of people moving back in. Mumbai, because a lot of Mumbai is in redevelopment. So Mumbai rentals, though have risen, are likely to see some sort of correction going ahead in the next 2 or 3 years when a lot of supply comes in. Delhi, again, less supply. So I think there are a mixture of these reasons, but one of the key reasons remains, I would say, rising interest rates as well.
Rising interest rates, inflation, and of course, what I caught from your conversation, and this is something that I'd like to throw back on Amarendra. Amarendra, I know there's a lot of noise, but look at the Indian market. Rentals have always been yields, let's say. What is the capital value? And for our audience, what are rental yields? These are the returns that you get as rent if you take it as a percentage of the capital value of the asset or the home that you're occupying. So these have actually been as low as 1.5% to 2% in India, which have now probably jumped to about 3.5%, and in some markets actually bordering on 4%. Amarendra, is this short term? Is it also a supply crunch? Because a lot of projects came to a halt. Bangalore is not a market where supply doesn't come in. I mean, there are tons of good developers and builders and lots of projects have been announced. So what's your sense on how rental yields will move and the supply situation in the next 2 to 3 years?
So I guess the rental yield part has nothing to do in our experience with buyer psychology, because I think home is a very sort of mixed asset class where people are not buying, and the middle class is not buying homes because they are trying to sort of judge it against, let's say, FD interest, which is even higher than the rental yields in India. But because it's tangible, it brings them prestige, it's a social security. They think it's a great kind of project to give it to your children. It's a very visible, tangible inheritance object, right? So there are mixed emotions that people deploy when they sort of are buying homes. So to me, rental yield and the home purchase behavior can remain like rational for long. On the topic of new constructions happening, so if you look at Manisha, the new constructions are happening actually outside of currently what I would call as livable area. These are areas wherein if a new project is coming in a livable area, it's expensive, dead expensive. So a lot of new constructions in Bangalore today are happening on, let's say, towards the new airport, Devanahalli. But from there to come to work to Whitefield or to Bellandur or to, Indranagar, Koramangala is an arduous task because of the transport infrastructure in this country. So I think the livable supply in the short run is going to be under demand supply mismatch, where demand will outstrip the supply. Whereas the far off areas like Devanahalli, you would see the reverse of it, wherein the rentals would be stable, or there will be no impact of inflation on them.
Dhaval, so looking at the fact that there are hot areas which are close to the IT hubs, and there probably the demand supply inequity will remain, and the fact that even there the rental yields are still about 3.9%. Do you believe that if the market actually takes cash out of all of real estate, we could see much better rental yields in this country, and rents are actually not expensive?
I see, for rental yields to improve, there are two things that need to happen. Either your capital cost of the building or the unit needs to go down, or your willingness to pay rent needs to go up. Now, if you see it in any of the tier 1 cities, people pay a substantial amount of their salaries. I would say, sometimes even as high as 20% or more as rents. So it's unlikely that you will get that much of capital appreciation to take your rental yields to 8-10%. Now, the only way I see, a way out of this, and this is again, sort of a speculation on my end, is that in India, we don't build to rent. So there are properties that are built to rent out. So they make better use of square footage, finishes, and they create alternate sources of revenue. And that's where the whole co-living industry has evolved. So tomorrow, if going ahead, we have organized rental coming in, I'm sure these yields will go up. But in the current scenario where people are buying in apartment complexes where they live and they rent out, I don't see a scenario where we'll cross 8 or 9% of yields.
Rental
very, very unlikely.
You've opened a big point of conversation, and if I work it backwards, it's pretty much that the capital cost of buying a home in any of the Indian cities is very high. I'm going to now move on the topic of what are the renters' rights. Now, Union Cabinet approved the Model Tenancy Act in 2021. All states are supposed to actually adopt it or modify it, because after all, land is a state subject. Now, this governs the rights and duties of both the tenants and the landlords. Yet, Avikshit, we hear tenants bitterly complaining against the arm twisting tactics of landlords. And comment on this. 2 months is what is supposed to be taken as deposit for renting out any residential apartment or a home, but it varies from 6 months to as much as 12 months in some places in Bengaluru, and 6 months in Bombay is a norm. So why is this happening?
So Manisha, in order to answer your question, let me give some background. As far as the Model Tenancy Act was concerned, that was actually more or less like a guiding principle to the states, and the states were supposed to adapt it in a form and manner that there was no compulsion on the states to follow as it is. The second point that I wanted to highlight, and which actually has a very crucial role to play on the question that you've asked, is the word rent itself. So we generally have this tendency of using the word rent very loosely. But when you go into the nitty-gritties and the remedies available to me, it actually means a variety of different things. For instance, if you come to a Bombay market, the trend would be to see licenses. There is no concept of rent here as such. When you go to other markets, you will see that there are a lot of leases that are happening. So the underlying laws are actually different, and it's not only purely on the basis of the Tenancy Act. Now, coming especially to the Tenancy Act, unfortunately, the Tenancy Act that way is very brief, very short. It's tried to address the dispute resolution mechanism and try to make it more efficient. But on these points of, on rental, what is the nature of rental, cap on rental, cap on deposit, it's absolutely silent.
Avikshit, are you saying that the Model Tenancy Act is not strong enough to protect the rights of the renters? Because if you go through the points, I buy your point that it's not binding on states. That's something quite obvious, because under the Constitution, housing and land is a state subject. But if I read through the pointers, there are tons of protections offered to tenants. Resolution is one, but there are things which have been specified. It's just about, isn't it about the fact that states have not adopted it? And therein lies the problem?
So Manisha, I'll be honest with you. If I do a comparison of the Central Act with the existing State Act that's there, let's for example take Maharashtra's example. The Maharashtra State Act is much more robust as far as protection to tenants are concerned. And that's probably one of the reasons why you've seen such a pushback at the state level on adapting those laws.
Okay.
Because the mindset is very clear that we are providing much more protection to the tenants in Maharashtra under the existing law. Then why should I adopt something which is lower in protection? And Manisha, if you go by the provisions of Section 6, 7, 8 of the Central Act, I feel that it can do much better as far as protection to tenants is concerned.
Right. Okay, that's a fair point, and we should probably bring it up. Amarendra, some of the Bangalore landlords are putting in crazy clauses. You have to whitewash, you have to do pest control when you vacate my home, to go, what you can eat, what should your marital status be. And of course, this is prevalent. Religion that you will bring in, or if I follow a certain religion, a lot of Bombay societies ban me from taking a home, my status as single or married. So many contours to that. I mean, is there a way to resolve this conundrum?
So I'll give you an example. We started Nestaway in 2015 in Bangalore. We started with 2 months of deposit, and I sort of say that with pride. That a lot of tenants quote Nestaway as example to sort of negotiate with their deposit amount with non-Nestaway owners, and a lot of times they're successful. This 2 months deposit, 5 months deposit, Hindu, Muslim, or a bunch of other things in general is actually a proxy for risk mitigation by the owner. Look, in India, if your house is worth 1 crore and it gets into a dispute, how long it could take how much of time, attention, energy it takes to kind of get it back. For an owner, he is trying to risk mitigate in ways he best understands what the risk is. Like if he comes from a certain section of society where he feels people from particular religion background, particular job profile can be riskier, he just wants to avoid sort of getting into that. So the state failure in addressing disputes in timely manner is actually getting reflected as biases in the market. When we went in and we said, hey, you know what, we are going to make sure that your house is going to come back to you, even if in the face of a dispute, because we are not going to civil courts. We are going to go to a one-party arbitration. All our rental contracts have those clauses. And when you could convince owners that, it is not risky, the residual risk of renting with Nestaway is much lower than you would rent that on your own. And if it is high, then you deposit as a proxy or some filter of tenants. So I guess it's a very complicated market failure rather than people acting funny.
And of course, owners, if they want to act funny, there's very little you can do, especially if they've got a property which is excellent and much in demand. Well, we'll take a quick break now. Stay with us for some answers on how we can actually create a larger stock of rental homes across the country, because home ownership isn't for everyone. And that is what Mr. Monani raised as a very important point. Can we create a larger stock? On that note, we'll take a quick break. What's making news in real estate is the whopping rise in rentals across India's top cities. It's not rocket science. We all know when demand exceeds supply, the cost of any good or service is bound to rise. So how do we create a larger stock of rental housing in India? Not everyone wants to own a home, even though the country is geared towards it. Millennials, Gen Z, in fact, many of them are happier renting it out. And we were in conversation with Dhaval Monani, Amarendra Sahu and Avikshit Moral. I'm going to come to you, Dhaval, because you raised this big point. As a country, we are more geared towards house ownership than house rentals. But the millennials are changing, next generation is changing. Do you think the urban rental housing policy or draft, I would say it's not a policy, would probably bring that change?
Frankly speaking, we are looking at the largest urban migration that will ever happen in human history. Today, we are looking at a shortfall of 26 million homes, but we have 10% of that, 2.5 million, 3 million people migrating to urban areas, households every year. So we don't have a choice but to increase it. In all of this milieu, we forget 2 points we overlook 2 points. That if you take any of India's larger cities, and I'll take this example of Ahmedabad because I happened to do a survey there. 14% of all stock in Ahmedabad is lying vacant for various reasons. Mm-hmm. And one of them definitely is that people don't want to get into agreements and problems with tenants, and that's where we need some intermediaries. Second, we also need a very conscious effort by the government to rationalize taxation on rental yields. Now, you cannot, a house is a capital expenditure. So you cannot write it off except for the exemption of 1.5 lakhs that is given. So it doesn't make business sense. But in spite of that, 66% of your rental, if you fall into that category, is taxed. So unless we can rationalize this, we will never create enough incentives for people to get into formal rental, create that stock.
Avikshit, what's your view? I mean, what is stopping the government from making or bringing to life that urban rental housing policy that's been, drafted in 2015 but never seen the light of day?
So, Manisha, I think one of the key consideration has to be a political consideration. Because Mumbai, at least, if you take the example of Mumbai, there is a strong voter base who are actually dependent on these kind of housings, and immediately nobody wants to rock the boat. There are 2-3 things that I actually just quickly wanted to bring to a notice. There was somebody during the show who mentioned about quick dispute resolution. Let me add a point here. The way of getting around things is not a quick resolution of dispute, but to ensure that there is no dispute that is getting created on a daily basis. That's how you draft the laws. That's one. Secondly, another important point which people don't discuss is the point of stamp duty. That's a revenue that goes to the government on a regular basis. But because of the way the stamp duty has been levied on these contracts, a majority of the people, in order to get away from the stamp duty net, don't register the agreement. So the data that is today available, I don't think it's a correct and accurate data, because majority of the people have not registered their agreement in order to not pay stamp duty.
Amarendra, what's your concluding statement in terms of how to clean up the market, A, and B, how to create more rental housing? I mean, look at all the foreign institutional money which is coming into real estate, but it's only going into commercial and office. Nobody wants to touch housing.
I think government has to think carefully about providing infrastructure status to rental-only housing, because in true sense, it's infrastructure for the new age, the young people to come to city and figure out differential rates of differential cost of capital for them. Because and I don't recollect where I read it, but I read somewhere that there are free government lands in cities, and government is actually seriously thinking about creating residential complexes only for rental purpose. So some of that is actually going to create new affordable stock in the market and could ease out rental pricing on long term.
We'll leave it at that. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for your views. Well, I'm going to conclude by saying in cities, rental housing is quite vital and a growing need of a wide variety or segments of people, so students or employees of private and public sector who move. Everyone needs a good quality rental housing. So let's hope that this becomes an important conversation and an idea from the government on how to go forward. It's a must for India's rapid urban transformation. Thanks for joining me. Goodbye.